Right, cool. Welcome everyone to the second status core dev meeting. I guess just briefly on the agenda, there's two parts. So one is in terms of specific topics that people want to talk about. So we have first light clients, then some stuff around desktop and mobile, code sharing and testing, hardware wallet, security, and first step towards the DAO. And then after that, we have stuff like in general going through different sort of teams and so on and see if there are specific things people want to talk about. There's also a HackMD link if you want to add details to notes and so on. Thank you, Andy, for taking notes. And just briefly, a lesson learned from last time that we want to try to focus discussion on sort of things that are future oriented and not sort of give updates about the past, but more things that require people to be here and so also try to squeeze out some sort of decisions about things that we want to do as outcomes. And if anyone wants to add something, we can add it at the very end. So I guess, do we have any specific things that people want to say beforehand, or any questions or anything? All right, cool. So first one, light clients, less and ULC. And so the context is that right now there's a bit of a disarray with respect to these efforts, and it's not clear what team is owning it and what deliverables are. And it's it's the top OKR that we have to have 10% of users using this. So we should be clear about sort of what we're doing here, both on a sort of short and longer time scale. So I guess, does someone want to start talking about this? Igor or Eugene or Boris or Adam, maybe.
Yeah,
see
so the Boris.
Sorry?
Yeah, you can continue.
UCPR is on reviews, so it's still reviewing it. So we have draft of integration VLC into status application. Now Igor is lead of this one. So we decided to start this one next week.
Yeah, essentially we had a call today with Boris about lesson ULC, what to do and with it. And yeah, I think this week I'll wrap stuff up with mobile like topics, and then yeah, we can start first bringing less, like making it sync. And so the plan is like first iteration is to make less sync again, and then enable it as a super work in progress option in the app, so people can switch to it if they want to, and then test it thoroughly and figure out what exactly the problems are, both with performance and functionality and stuff like that. And then we'll go from there. Like it depends on which issues we'll find and how long it takes. It's a little bit too early to say. It's still a roadmap, but somewhere along the way we need to fix the most annoying issues with less, and we need to also make a ULC an option in the UI, and then we need to polish that, and then yeah, and then we might unva work in progress, yeah, the options and things like this. So before actually until we reintroduce less and test it, there is not that much to talk about something specific, because there are a lot of things that might be wrong that we need to fix.
Okay, cool. So the idea is the focus is on first getting less into the app and then go from there. So not have parallel tracks.
Yeah. The first iteration is getting less as an option inside the application. And I mean, if it would take like, I don't know, a day to add ULC as an option too, then it makes sense to add it as well. If not, then I mean, it also depends on will ULC go to like upstream or not. Like if we get it upstream like next week, then why not have two options?
Both, like, And what's our plan for nodes? Like, are we running it in our cluster? Are we using something external? And how does this interact with the discovery work that Peter Brittany was working on?
My thoughts, again, initial, they might change. Right now is to use the same cluster. And there is one performance-related node. That's why I want to do this, because right now we already have all these connections because of the Whisper nodes. So if we use less on the same node as we use Whisper, then it won't be like additional network connections, and that might save battery and things like this. Because if we have, like, later we need to switch to proper discovery and yada, yada, yada. But right now, just to reduce the scope of like regressions, the scope of like, especially like performance issues, we probably should reuse the same connections that we already have, and we already have our status cluster. So essentially the first step will just remove Infura from the equation, right? We'll still have our cluster, but we'll also need to run less nodes on the cluster on the same addresses that we have for boot nodes right now. So that's my initial idea. That's it.
Cool.
So also Dimitri started working on looking in VIP node because the other alternative is that we will run LES servers on our side, and that's not a long-term solution. This is just we don't want to become like a another source of LES servers that is centralized and so on. So we can run them, but that's a lot of maintaining work. And as we have just one DevOps guy, it's just gonna add more on him. And so I don't know how it looks like with hiring, but if we want to put more pressure on that team, so DevOps team, then this needs to grow. Right now it's just like crazy. So another thing is that we'll try to we can try to integrate with VipNode, and that's kind of being researched with Dimitri, but it's still not really clear yet how we could do that.
But my idea was to have like our current cluster as a temporary solution, because it just makes it faster to reintroduce it back. Long term, surely. I mean, otherwise it's not what we want. We want decentralization, and we kind of centralize everything to our cluster. It's like the opposite of what we want.
Yeah, just saying that it might be like a bit. That's just another thing that we would need to do on the backend side, and I guess on the cluster side. But I think it has not been started yet, so this work should be also started. The other thing is that we could potentially get LES servers from the Ethereum cluster. I was looking into that, but the problem with that is you need to wait like at least 10 minutes to find something. So it can find something, but it's a lot of time to get even one working LES server. So I guess that's just not gonna be an option.
Guys, there's an interesting option in Mist right now where it uses Infura when you start the app in order to get like balances and stuff like that. And in the background, it starts looking for good nodes and connecting to the whole Ethereum network through LES or through whatever you happen to choose, like Light Client or anything else. So that's one option forward. But another thing I wanted to mention is this fact that whatever we want to do with our cluster, Infura is likely doing better right now in terms of using a centralized solution. So sort of redoing their effort and building up this huge monster on our side seems really inefficient. Like from a who does what well perspective.
Yeah, but did you get any like I was exactly saying that it's a temporary solution, so we don't need to be like good. If it's an option that's like with a lot of warnings and only for some people, then it's like we don't need to be as good as Infura at scaling and things like this. To release LES or ULC to like production for real, like not as an like option for some, people, then we definitely need to have proper discovery and like real solution. So it's all good ideas for production, right? But we need to start a bit simpler.
Yeah, but it's not only about delivering like a cluster of nodes that can serve the stuff. It's about us exposing ourselves to a huge amount of risk of being attacked, risk of being taken down, risk of being, all these things.
Yeah,
and these.
Right, but I think that this idea with the LES servers running in our cluster just for testing purposes is never gonna be used by releases, right? Am I right? Or
I was thinking that we have this option in releases, but it's not on by default. So if somebody wants to test it, and we'll give a warning to him, that's okay. If you enable it, everything will break. So it's so while it's like a work in progress feature, we might use it, but to claim that it works, we definitely should switch from.
What is the associated with the additional risk of adding this into the cluster we already have? Is it that much more? Because in terms of like a additional risk on our side for testing purposes, if we already have the cluster running, what else are we exposing by adding this functionality?
So what I'm getting at is that I don't mind us running a cluster, but we should not be running the cluster.
It should not be
right?
the central point of functionality for the application. It's more along the lines of a testing environment for us to make sure it works.
Well, it doesn't even have to be that. Like, it can be a cluster that runs there in order to improve the Ethereum network as a whole, right? So we can be providing this tiny little spoke in the whole system because we have an interest in the network running well.
It's more like a bootstrap to the network versus the network itself.
Well, no, it's just like one more participant in the network, right? That's the thing, and we'd be an equal participant amongst many, right?
Yeah.
But if we start building too much functionality, which is status specific, such that only we can run the nodes and only we do run the nodes, it's there where we become that single point of failure. And at that point, Infura is not that bad.
Can we parallelize this work? So because I have a hunch that a lot of the problems with LDS are not necessarily only with sort of the nodes, but also in terms of running it on a phone and sort of when to sync and specific API, whatever specific API things and so on. So maybe we can parallelize it. So this sort of swarm that's being formed can focus on that. And then there's another piece of work which is centered around discovery and DApp nodes and these kinds of things. And maybe that makes sense to be owned by the peer-to-peer team. So these two things they can be done in parallel, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Does someone disagree with that, General? I feel like that. Then we capture both things.
I think one thing that we need to, the second one, the discovery, probably should start a bit later because it's still nice to know. So what I'm afraid of, like, if we want to avoid this, like, anyway, that we start over optimizing and solving optimization problems that we don't have. Like, okay, we decided that out of a sudden we only sync on Wi-Fi when we don't have problems syncing on like 3G, and start like developing something like this that we don't really need to develop. So unless these like premature optimizations are, because there are a lot of cool ideas, how can we optimize that, but we don't really know what we need to optimize on unless we start really working with it. So as long as this one is addressed, then yeah, it surely should be parallelized, because it's like two different tracks. One is how to discover nodes and how to be one among many, and another one how to make the protocol itself work and work on a mobile device, and how to consume this like whatever clusters are running.
So in the interest of making sure that we cover all the topics, does someone sort of strongly disagree with this approach or think that there's something big that we're missing?
I just want to say that it's going to be a little bit more work if you want to even have like a few LES servers on our site. So I think I guess we need them to, at least for testing purposes. So we should start earlier. The case is that even if we run them and just make them a part of a Ethereum network, they're just going to be like all the slots going to be taken by some like other peers, because it's just like the Ethereum network is just running too few LES servers. So there will gonna be some mechanism that just make sure that there are slots for our for status apps, like basically to connect to, because otherwise it's just not gonna change anything. So there's a little more things on the side if you want to run those nodes, but I think it's okay. I mean, in my opinion, we should never go with that to release, but just to have something to start looking into LES mobile and generally test the whole solution. That's needed pretty much.
You mean that to keep it in night list, but never keep them in the release build?
Yeah, I would never put them into release in the release in the beta.
Okay. I mean, for the first few iterations, maybe it makes sense, and we can always revisit that.
What do you guys?
Yeah, maybe we'll have some mechanism to. Yeah, it just needs to be somehow added.
What do you guys think of this idea in general that we actually treat Infura as one option amongst many, and the application just connects to uses them interchangeably, whatever option it has.
As a target goal, I think it's a good idea.
The graceful changing thing, yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know, it connects to Infura first, and then it connects to the network, and technically it should be getting the same information from both, and then it can make like a smart choice between the two based on whatever, right? Based on Infura being up and working, based on Infura feeling getting similar information to what the rest of the network is giving, like the ML alpha n. So we trust Infura nodes just as we would trust any other less node, right? And then we can also play with things like when we're about to make transactions, we beef it up. When we're not making transactions and just looking, we tone it down. We can look at options like, I don't know, if Infura goes down, then the app just keeps working because of the nature of how it switches between these nodes.
Yeah, I like the idea because, for example, with VipNode integration, you need to pay for that. So you need to have first some channel to pay for that service. And there's a couple of options, I guess, that the guys behind VipNode are considering. But I believe that in the future it's going to be work this way, that you actually need to pay for the service like alias servers, because now it's currently visible that it's not possible to just have like enough number of alias servers running. So even if you want some, you need to pay for that. And I believe that that's going to be an option that you use in Infura, and then you just switch the alias server that you bought. So
just in the interest of time, maybe we can just sum it up, and then we can continue discussion afterwards. But just to sum it up, there will be a swarm with Boris, Eugene, and Igor, and possibly others, and with the initial focus of getting less into the app, and then you will see and so on, and also explore these seamless integration things. And then peer-to-peer team will sort of support, and there will be continued discussion about exactly how the discovery process will work, whether it will be on in release or not, and also at what point we can sort of have this be graceful. Is that roughly accurate, or is some viewpoint that's missing from that?
Sounds good from my side.
Sounds good.
Sorry, Oskar, can you just repeat who's going to be in that swarm?
I think it's in the idea, but whatever is in the idea, that point being mostly that it's one that swarm is responsible for it. That's mostly what I want to get at. So it's not like 3 different teams that are kind of like looking at each other. So that's the swarm that's in draft right now, 2.8, whatever it's called, 2.8.9. I don't remember.
Okay.
2.9.3.
2.9.3, yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Okay, next one. Desktop mobile app code sharing and automated testing. And the context for this is that we recently started sharing code base between desktop and mobile. And there are some childhood illnesses issues related to this. Just the goal is just general discussion and outline next steps. So I believe, Max, was it you that added this?
Yeah, sure. So basically, this movement, this might be like a beginning of movement to have one single platform. To have one single code base to support different platforms. Right now, it's mobile and desktop. It looks like that for ecosystem, how similar platforms are working for others software products. Desktop is pretty essential also, like mobile, and can do things and have such features that cannot be done on mobile, and that's why pretty important for users. And such movement also can be like start steps to have a code base that once we will able to port for others platforms, like embedded platforms or anything else which we will have in mind in future. But at the moment, once we have started to share the same code base, desktop builds, they started pretty often to fail, mostly we believe because currently we don't have any kind of unit testing and any kind of end-to-end testing for functionality, which we share with mobile builds. So will be great if mobile team can suggest based on their experience. For example, will we be able to cover all functionality or most of functionality if for desktop builds we will implement and run on every GitHub PR unit tests for Clojure script code, or maybe only Clojure script code is not enough to cover all possible issues, runtime Clojure script issues, and additionally to that, we will need to have separate end-to-end tests for desktop also. So it's like the question for suggestion to mobile team.
So I can answer for desktop end-to-end test automation. We already started research, and for now, for us, the main goal just to replace our mobile driver, which named Appium driver, with a desktop driver. So we will be able to reuse the same logic as we are using in tests for mobile in desktop. And so far we tried 3 drivers, all of them not acceptable solution, and I don't want to share why technical issues, but I can if somebody interested. So it was like Appium driver for Mac, PyAtom, and Sikuli. Sikuli basically is image recognition based tool, and we are not going to keep a screenshot of each element. It's really heavy. And it's not possible with our actual test design, with our actual automation framework. So all other projects seems to be dead, but with some contribution we can make them alive. And so far we are going to try a couple of other drivers, and I believe in the end of this week we will have POC for desktop automation running on Mac OS X, or the worst case scenario running on Linux. That's it from end-to-end test side regarding desktop automation.
Sounds awesome.
If you have any ideas, experience, not only you, anyone here, with desktop automation tools, bad experience, good experience, just share in chat, would be really useful. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you. Great.
Pedro, did you have, maybe it's not the same, but I remember you had some desktop experience. Maybe it was a specific platform.
Yeah, not in web related platform. It was more .NET and desktop.
Okay.
Was it Windows or it was .CoreNet, I believe?
Windows, not yet .NET Core, no.
Okay. So yes, but from my perspective, we really should take care about running unit tests. First of all, we have them, and we can catch that errors on before running any end-to-end tests. And we have that mess with builds when their market is green in GitHub, but actually they are failed. So before any end-to-end testing, we really need to fix builds and to run unit tests. And I think that it will be more quicker than doing end-to-end test solution.
Yes, that sounds reasonable. And when we are talking about unit tests, another question appears that if we will run the same similar unit test for desktop, this will mean that we will run the same set of tests both for mobile and desktop. And it seems that we need to move to some common set of unit tests for both platforms.
Is there some Clojure dev here who wants to look into it? Maybe this is something one of the Clojure devs on desktop team could look into, because that seems like what the original need is. I guess no one is on the call.
Yeah, we probably should prioritize this because it's pretty essential to work on.
Is there something blocking that you know of in terms of Clojure development in desktop team for this right now?
It's not blocking, but every 2 days we catch something that breaks runtime for desktop builds on nightly builds.
So what would happen if Clojure desktop sort of adds unit tests that run for both, and then we can enable it as a blocker so we don't get pull requests? We don't get pull requests merged that block desktop unit tests. Would that be a reasonable first step that the desktop team could do?
Yes, that's priority, I believe.
But guys, sorry for interrupting, but right now I can see that we are building Clojure and we will run unit tests twice. Would be great to make this simple, similar pipeline for both desktop and mobile, not just for separate pipelines.
Yeah, but we also, Jakob right now is refactoring all the build parts. So to also merge the build process for desktop and because right now we have 2 different jobs that are running, and yeah, it's a bit messy with that. So it should be fixed in a few days.
I can give some context on that. I'm pretty much done. The idea is to run in parallel all 4 builds, which is the iOS, the Android, the Linux, and the macOS. Although it's actually 6 because we run the Android and iOS twice. Second time with a specific end-to-end test option. It's actually 6 runs in parallel. And once I'm done with that, we can probably introduce the testing changes. And that should be done today or tomorrow.
Okay. Jacob, I think there's some your audio. So would you mind adding these, what you said, as notes to the HackMD?
Sure, will do.
Do we have anything else with respect to desktop, mobile stuff? All right, cool. Next up, hardware wallet, the light version. Context is we want to support hard wallet for DevCon, if possible. This requires a lot of coordination across hardware, development, security, UX. It's also not captured in current goals or priorities among teams. And additionally, we also have 2 sort of hardware products. So the goal for this is to discuss roughly what we need, any unknowns, and start to figure out the team and sort of point people for this, maybe a rough timeline, and also understand maybe the relationship between the 2 wallet products. I guess, yeah, take it away. Green?
Yes, so this is Guy-Louis speaking. So I just joined the team last week, and I'm going to product manage this hard wallet. So I'm together with Michele today. So what we have for today is a light version of this hard wallet developed by Michele. It's a Java card applet. That, by the way, we are starting a security audit of the applet code by an external company. It's starting right now. So this Java card is pretty simple. It's a Java card with no MMI. It's contactless, running on NFC. So we'll focus the client integration on Android first. Maybe also with a PC if we source USB to smart card reader. And so the applet is code complete. It's documented on GitHub, all the APIs. And so what's at stake now is to start the integration in the client. So there's a goal to have a first version of the product distributed at DevCon, so end of October. So it's a pretty tight deadline. What we started to do is to write some of the basic user stories we want to enable. And they are actually quite simple. There are 3 things: setup of the hard wallet, signing transaction, and login. Setup meaning we want to enable the user to create a new status account on his hard wallet or import an existing account on the hard wallet. Signing transaction, meaning that to sign a transaction, the user will have to tap his card on the back of his Android phone and enter the PIN code of the card instead of entering the current password. And third thing is enable login into status account with the hard wallet. So instead of selecting an account and input the password, the user on the login screen would just have to tap his card and enter the PIN code. So these are basically the 3 user-facing scenarios we would like to enable and integrate in the client. There's another thing at stake on which that we have to decide quite quick is how the applet is loaded on the Java card. There are 2 options. A first option where the manufacturer where we'll source these Java cards will load the applet directly on the card. And the second option where the client would take care of this at first setup. In this case, the client would upload through NFC the applet on the Java card. So there are different user interface, security, and feature consideration regarding this choice of how the applet is loaded. We've been discussing that with Michele, and we'll share by tomorrow a document with some of the consideration to take into account to share with you so that we decide on which path we'll go, since it has impact, of course, on the client integration. So that's basically what we're trying to do. There are some implications on the client side, probably to discuss. I don't know if that's the moment right now. Like one I have in mind is the fact that the user would not have any password to define and remember any password. How we will manage that in the client. We imagine the password is used to store some secret data on the client. And does that need to remain once the private key and the whisper key would be on the Java card? And maybe the other thing to note right now is also the whisper key. The Java card can derive the whisper key directly on the Java card. So that would be a way to not have the whisper key anymore in Flash in the client and to only keep it in the RAM of the client. By getting it from the Java card. So, and well, that's overall the scope that's been discussed up to now. So there's a document with the user scenario that's been shared and that's open for discussion. And well, I guess we need to set up a team working on that with some contributors from the client side and from the user experience team, and with Michele and myself at least. So that's open for discussion. And so this is the hardware light. Maybe we can discuss that before we brief about the hardware wallet Pro, which is
we can. Yeah, we can skip the Pro thing for now. I guess, yeah, thank you.
So, yeah. Yes.
Andrea, did you start looking into this, or I saw some, yeah.
Yeah, so I started working on this a couple of weeks ago, but just some hours, and then I stopped because we had some security bug to fix and follow. But the first thing I've done was checking a PR that is already open in the Go Ethereum repository, and changing some parts, especially in the initialization and in the pairing code. And then after this, I would like to understand what we want to do, like having a fork of that, or like contributing on that PR, but I don't know if they are still working on this. And of course, it depends also on our like timing and everything. So I think these days I can maybe focus on this.
Goran, what are your thoughts from sort of closer client point of view?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to reduce the scenarios to the bare minimum. That applies to both the closure and the overall, look at the thing. So when we said setup, sign transaction, and login, which ones of those are actually the bare minimum? Separate the. If you had to remove one from those three, which one would you remove?
If we were to remove one, I think we should keep signing up the transaction and remove logging in. But then there's the question of the password.
Excellent. So we are back to the password. So you mentioned that instead of password, we might use pins.
Yes, in any case, there's a pin. Any command sent to the card is authenticated with a pin. Yes.
Okay, so basically, the user would have to use PIN instead of a password.
It's a combination of both the hardware and the PIN.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, if say your card gets stolen without your phone, the thief would need to figure out the PIN still, right?
Yes.
which I assume would be a bit easier. It's a numeric pin like for bank cards, right?
So it's a 6.
But it will block. In 3 attempts, it will block.
Okay. Yeah, but my other concern is that we would still need to support the password login and the password signed transaction and all the general stuff, because not everyone is going to have these cards.
Well, the user chooses if he wants to set up an account with the regular way with the password, or if he has a card, then he can set up his account on the card. But in this case, it would be much better not to have a password anymore. Otherwise, it's going to make too many things for him to remember.
I forget who made it, but someone made really good flow diagrams of the user experience for both options, depending on and when you'd make those options and what part goes away based on which part of the step you're in. I think that'd be useful to put in the notes so people can look over that.
Yes, it's a document done by Dennis from UX. We can share the link. The link is in the comment now. Michele did it.
And I think it would be important if you get rid of the password to have to push forward on the biometric data for unlocking the app. In terms of a usability standpoint, having the card out every time you want to use the application may be a bit annoying. So if we get rid of the password, having something like facial recognition or fingerprinting could unlock these types of things while using the PIN plus a hardware wallet to do any type of value exchange.
But with biometric, an attacker can force the user to unlock the card. Because
that's true, but depending on what we're doing.
But you cannot deny your face.
Yeah, but depending on what you're doing, I guess what are we separating valuable, right? Is unlocking the app value in itself or sending a transaction value? So at what point do we have to enforce hard security versus just getting into the app? Because your biometrics can open up your phone. Your biometrics can do a lot of things already. Is sending chat messages the buck stops there in terms of security, or is a fingerprint enough? If you have all three, that should be enough to send value or do anything with the wallet. So accessing the wallet should have access. You should need all three, or at least the PIN plus hardware wallet. But maybe sending a public chat may not need that much. That's open for discussion on what we think is most important.
Yeah. Regarding the attacker being able to coerce the user into using the face or a finger or something like that, if the attacker is in a position to do that, he can just use an iron rod and convince the user to give up the password.
If he's a criminal, but if he's authority, if he tortures the person, then it leaves marks. It could be more difficult. But to just
depends on how skillful the authorities are.
Sorry, in the interest of time, do we want to sort of decide on roughly how we want to proceed? Because there's a lot of security considerations and things we can go into detail. But just I guess from a sort of people perspective, like what do we need to move this forward? If Andrea's looking into it from the Ghost side, I know Goran, how does it look from the Closure side, and also Chad from the UX side?
Yeah, all right. Basically, what we need to is a timeline. A timeline with realistic expectations, with realistic resource plan, and so the only way we can plan this is with a timeline. Timeline, for example, when do we get the cards? I know that the prototype cards have been already mailed, so I expect they would be around for in a couple of days. Chad, you had some question about the delivery of the promotional cards. We mentioned something that we are going to hand out like a couple of thousand cards. Do we have any update on that?
Yeah, Guy-Louis can probably talk better to that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, well, actually, this we need to define how we load the applet on the cards, because this has a direct impact on how we source them, to whom. So that's the first, I think that's one of the first team discussion we need to have, is decide how we do the loading of the applet. Because if we decide to have the manufacturer load them, then it's almost sure we won't get products for the DevCon. That's a structural decision to be able to source cards. I think that's one of the first steps. And then regarding the timeline, so there's all the sourcing of hardware parts, which I will manage, and let's try to define a list of features and discuss with you the implementation timelines you see, to put up together this overall project timeline.
Okay, so the way it sounds to me is that directly on the critical path is actually the decision how to load.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So if the manufacturer loads, we are not going to make it. Basically, that's your assessment.
Yes, we are not going to be. I think we are not going to be able to make it by a manufacturer. We could do 100 cards by ourselves, program them ourselves, but more of a workshop exercise than a manufacturing of a final product. So,
okay. Yeah. Okay, so basically, the only way you can see this to be done in a timely manner on 1,000 scale is with a bootstrapped loading.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the first decision on the UI side. On the mobile dev side, the majority of the major dependency that defines the timelines is actually the selection of the use cases. So I guess that kind of depends on this decision as well.
Okay.
Yeah, Andrea, is there anything that affects the Go side?
Yeah, I was also thinking in general that we started discussing about decoupling the keys, the wallet key and the whisper key, and I think we need it for this because we were talking about having like the whisper key only memory on the client. But for now, since the key is the same, it will be basically the main key, which is also the wallet key in memory, because you need to send the messages when you chat. So I think one dependency is starting and finishing the coupling the keys. And I know that I think there's a lot of work also in the protocol and in the chat, because we need to like add some features like asking the wallet address request, because it's not derived from the whisper key anymore, and then also compatibility between different versions. So I think also this part will be long, and I think it's needed if I understood correctly, like the way we, yeah.
Does someone want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just one extra question for Andrea. I'm not actually, I'm not too familiar with the direct consequences of the decision, of the loading decision, but intuitively, it seems to me that if we do the bootstrapping option, we are also, among other things, going to have more custom code on the client side. So that can also affect the timeline, with the important difference that it's being done with the resources on our side, so we can actually, have a choice. So Andrea, I'm not sure how familiar you are at the moment, but is this something which we should be concerned about?
Yeah, also this part will be like a lot of, more work. I don't know exactly now, like how long it could be, but for sure, it's yeah, it will be.
Maybe we can fork more detailed conversation about this outside the call. Does someone want to own writing up a Swarm proposal for this? And maybe we can talk about it more. I also think that we probably need another like a closure developer, probably, because Goran is the only one on the wallet team, and then I'm guessing we also need a UX designer. Is there anything else that we think we need? And does someone want to own this?
So I'm not so sorry. This is Guy-Louis speaking. I'm not already very familiar with the swarms and so on, but if I have to, I mean, if it's product management that can own it, I can own it. I don't, sorry for my.
Oh yes, sure. No, not at all, not at all. So essentially, we can talk about it outside. I think both Gore and Andrea can also help you. It's essentially just a proposal with the goals and iterations and what roles are needed. It's in GitHub status IAM/ideas.
Okay.
Gore and Andrea, do you want to help out?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, basically it's scope definition. It's something we need to do anyway. So nothing weird. Yeah.
And we also need a close developer. Is that correct, or?
Yeah.
So I guess we can talk about that outside. Cool. Anything else on?
I don't think so for the hard wallet light. No.
Cool. I see Jacek is messaging me. I'm trying to promote him to be a panelist, but I'm failing. Johnny, do you want to help out? I'm double clicking here. Nothing's working. Does someone know how you promote people? And also fill in the room.
It might be because there's 25 participants on this call, which I think is probably the limit.
But they are in the call. They're just not panelists.
You should have a settings thing bottom right. Okay.
Well, I can jump off and join YouTube
to
make space.
All right. Let's move on. Next one, security. Yes. So context. Yeah. I guess. Do you want to take it away, Corey?
Yeah. So if I haven't talked to you already, I'm Corey. I'm the new security guy, which means I'll probably be bugging everyone about what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think I've been trying to do a lot of polling around the company to see what people are working on, how they view security in general, because I was brought on with the assumption that there isn't a lot of security practices in place amongst the company. I'd say that there's no formal protocols and checklists and methodology for doing traditional quote unquote security, but the backdrop of security amongst the company is really high. So I'm really happy that I didn't walk into a bunch of landmines. And I think that everyone has the basis of what security is. They just don't have the confidence to say they have it. I'm going to be working on trying to put forth a lot of checklists that go in place of what you're currently doing, so you can feel more confident about ticking off all the boxes with respect to security and whatever aspect that is, because it's a pretty broad concept. And I hope that y'all can help me do that in a lot of ways, because I can't do it myself. And that's going to be basically, if you have any concerns, comments, questions, send them to me, or if something happens online, you can always send it an email to security@status.im for any type of quick response, I'd say. Let's see. I wanted to bring up the concept. This is kind of I'd say a mind frame when thinking about security that I don't think people have ever been exposed to, is the pyramid of pain. And that's when looking at potential threats within the company. This is built for, I guess, looking at traditional centralized infrastructure and looking for things to see if people are attacking you or not. Would it think it'd be easier to share my screen, or I put the link in the agenda notes Slack if you want to bring it up yourselves? What do you think is easier?
If you're not share your screen, I think that would be great.
Okay, let me see here. Make sure I have it on my.
Also for the recording.
Okay. So the pyramid of pain. Let me share my screen real quick. Here. Can everyone see that? Is that viewable for everyone? Okay, great. Yep. Pyramid of Pain was brought up from a security researcher a long time ago, I think around 2013 or so. And the concept is relatively simple. If you look at the graphic here, you have the types of things that you can see, indicators in your network or your infrastructure that show that someone's doing something malicious. And at the very bottom, you have things that are everywhere, yet easy to change. And at the top, you have TPPs, which stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures. And as you move up this pyramid, you increase the difficulty to change that type of indicator, which means that you make it more and more and more difficult for if you can find these indicators and remove them from your network, you make it more difficult for the attacker to change what he does. So for instance, hash values, say you find a malicious file in your network, and you then let everyone know this hash value exists across the network and you get it out. It's very easy for the attacker to change something about that file and then thus change the hash file. So you're not really tripping him up in any way, shape, or form. So you can find these things easy, but the attacker just changes it and keeps going about whatever he's doing. And then as you move up to this pyramid, you continue along that same type of thing. So at the very top, which is where you want to be finding things, is you're identifying the tactics, techniques, and procedures an attacker uses to attack whatever you're doing. And if you're able to mitigate these types of things, then you're able to you force the attacker to change his behavior, which is the most difficult thing to change. And the reason I bring this up is a mindset of, if you're building something or making a change, you want to look at the types of vulnerabilities that are introduced or are already there, and think about what gets left over, what you can look for to find I guess misuse of whatever you're doing. And I try to be as general in term here, because although this is a developer call, this applies to UX, this applies to all kinds of things, because it's a decentralized project. And I just wanted to kind of bring up this idea of, like, as you do things, I want you to have some type of back-end mindset of what does this do from a security perspective, and how can I find those types of artifacts, and where on this pyramid would they lie? Not necessarily specifically in terms of domain names, IP addresses, etc. Like, although that may be appropriate for what you're doing, more along the lines of, if I can detect these things, how difficult is it for the attacker to change that? Does it lie in the bottom in terms of hash values, or is it up to the very top in terms of behavior? And we want to try and always do things / be able to see things and change things that are at the very top here, because that's what keeps people from, if you change an attacker's behavior, more often than not, they're just going to leave you alone because they're lazy and they don't want to change their tooling. I'll stop there and kind of ask questions or answer questions or get comments. Is this a concept that is useful to you?
Do you have some examples of how something like this might apply to things we are doing or planning on doing in depth?
Well, that's actually the next point that I wanted to bring up. This is a traditional way of looking at things, and there isn't a lot of stuff out there that points towards how this changes for the type of development that we do. And I'm writing about this. I'm trying to put it in a framework that makes sense for people, so that I have concrete examples of how to apply this same type of concept to decentralized app building, because it's very different, and the attack surface is very different. And it's kind of a new thing. There isn't a lot of stuff out there that I found, at least, that explains this type of stuff. So I think it'd be worthwhile to even brainstorm on the types of things that we do. That I want to rebuild the pyramid for what we do in general, if that makes sense. And this is something I've been talking with the other security folks in the community to try and help do. So as I build this out, and I hope if you have any ideas or ways of doing that, to send them my way to help me kind of build that out more robustly. I want to push forth this idea in our community. So I guess not. I'll develop that more concretely and share it next time. I've been writing on it pretty thoroughly.
I guess also this would be an opportunity if anyone has any questions around sort of security and these things. This will be an opportunity for that as well. And I think we have this security champ with. Yeah, sorry, good.
Yeah, forgive me my noobness on this, but didn't Igor start a security champs procedure? And what are the overlaps between what was happening there and what Corey's doing now?
I will be trying. I'm taking over a lot of that security champion stuff so that Igor doesn't have to wear that hat at least as heavily as he used to. I'm still trying to figure out a way to build that in so that it's not an incredible amount of time for the participants of security champions. I want to build. I would like that to be something that we do, and I'm continuing building the framework of what that looks like. They went through a threat modeling exercise with incorporating the ENS name. They actually came up with some good results, and I was really happy with it. And I want to make sure that we can do things like that. And I'll be building out the framework. That's a good part of what I think I'll be doing is building framework or tool sets that allow everyone to make better decisions about what they're doing. And that's going to be done through the initiative that Igor started with Security Champions, if that makes sense. I just don't want it to take up all of your time because I know all of you wear different hats. And I don't want this to be a heavy hat that you have to wear. Granted, but at the same time, security has to be an important aspect of what you do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Cool. So at the top of the pyramid with the tactics, techniques, and procedures, I mean, are you talking about there basically like the digital fingerprint of one unique hacker, or is it more like schools of hacking?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So like think about so right below the pyramid, I'll share my screen again. There we go. So right below the TTPs, you see tools, right? And so this is what, if you were to find the fingerprint of a various tool and able to stop that, the underlying attack could possibly still be happening in your network, but you've only mitigated a specific tool that does that attack. So what the attacker would have to do to change, if he's using that tool, is just change the tool set, the toolbox to do the same type of attack. A better way of defeating this type of thing is to find the underlying attack and mitigate that. And the example that most people use here for doing that is, say, identifying people doing a pass the hash attack, where someone takes hashed credentials and reuses those hashed credentials to get authenticated on the server. And if you're able to identify that, then you mitigate all of the possible tool sets that are capable of doing that, as opposed to just one. And so you've mitigated that entire attack surface, as opposed to just one tool that can do that attack. And that's a better way of protecting your network, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you say tactics, techniques, and procedures, it sounds like you're really saying that it's like the underlying vulnerability. And if you can fix that,
that's I think a better way to put it. It's more along the lines of a behavior for an attacker, which corresponds to an underlying attack. It's like some people are really good at X type of attack and use various amount of tools to do that type of attack. And so that's a behavior / underlying vulnerability in the system.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. I like that I'm using my hands, but no one can see it. So that's really good.
Cool.
So another thing that I wanted to bring up, I've had a conversation with a company called ThreatStack, which looks at cloud infrastructure monitoring. Because we don't have a large security team looking at the infrastructure that we currently have, because we do rely on some type of centralization at the moment and always will have some form of infrastructure. I want to make sure that I at least understand what's happening on an infrastructure from a threat perspective, like who's trying to get at the network, who's moving around, what users are on, et cetera. And I've set up a call with a company called ThreatStack that will give us a demo as to what they're capable of and why we may want to do it. I'd be curious to see. I'll share my screen again to show you their website. I'd be curious on who would like to join that call. And then we can have a discussion on whether or not we think it's a reasonable thing for us to do and if we need it. I can't.
I'd like to join that as well. I had it set up once, but I was too busy, so I had to risk.
Who is that? Can I? Jacob. Okay. Yeah. I think you definitely should be on the call because you're the infrastructure guy, and you'd have more of an opinion as to whether or not this is useful for us and whether or not we can just roll our own. Because there's certain things that I can do that do some type of this, but it takes me away from it takes some of my time away from other things I should be doing, if that makes sense. Like I'd say the entire offering that this company has is equivalent to about a full-time employee with as much infrastructure as we currently have. And I want to see if that's reasonable for something we need, because as over time goes on, that reliance on infrastructure should go down based on the principles we have as a company and what we're trying to do as an application.
That's a good point.
Justic is also interesting, and I might be interested as well. Interested.
Okay, let's get a list of people, and I'll include you in the emails, and we'll set up a time for that, because he's basically just waiting for me to respond to him with who I want to join. And I've given him a rough outline of what our infrastructure is so that they can create a demo tailored towards what we would expect from their company on what we have. And so this is the seed. You can look at kind of an idea of what an attack is. And this is like a AWS attack, someone gaining access to credentials across AWS infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And then, but since we don't have a lot of this stuff, it may not work well for what we do. We don't do traditional app development, or at least app production and things like that. But we also have credentials that we care about. And I would encourage you to go to the website and then look at the video that shows you this stuff. And then for the demo, we'll discuss whether or not it's appropriate for us.
Awesome. Cool. Is there anything else, like questions, something around security before we move on?
About pyramid of pain, interesting if to replace attacker to, for example, to developer of the service. Other part of pyramid will still look the same, for example, because developer selects tools, select some procedures to implement the rest of system part. So from that point of view, developers should aware of how attackers can behave, and this will enhance selection of tools, procedures, and overall security of the system.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Something I want to reiterate. I'm not the domain expert of what you guys do, and so I need your help, because you understand how things work better than I do for whatever specialty you have, which means that you understand the types of tools someone can use or the types of vulnerabilities that exist with what you specialize in, which helps me understand the overall risk surface of the application. It's like I can't do everything. I need your help and your specialties to identify these types of things with me so that we can all mitigate them. I think that's what you were saying. Is that right?
Yes.
Cool. Should we move on?
Oh, one more thing. I think the last thing I have for now. There was a social engineering attack that was attempted on with Kim. She found an email in her spam folder that basically was someone pretending to be Jared, asking for her phone number so that he can do a task for her really quickly, her personal phone number. And what this was an attempt was getting access to her phone number so that they could do social engineering to then transfer over her SIM card potentially to then gain access to whatever she has SMS two-factor authentication with, or whatever her phone number had provided in terms of security. She didn't, of course, follow up on this, and she reported it to us through the Slack. But I want you to be aware of these types of things, and if you see them, please send them to me so that I can investigate further. If you have any questions on what that attack is, or like the idea around it, you're more than welcome to ask too. It's just I'm going to be sending like a PSA around of like a write-up of what this is, what it potentially can do, and how to mitigate, or like what to do about it in case you accidentally fall for something like this, or what it exposes you to, so you can be aware of it. So it's actually happening. This is at her Kim at status.im, and there's somehow or another people are getting into at least the protocol in which we create emails for the company, which is basically first name at status.im, and then broad spamming out these types of things to see if they can get access to some of our underlying credentials through social engineering attacks. So be wary of those things. You might find them in your spam folder, you might not. I think we should also look to put in place of like a certain amount of procedures or general guidelines of things we will ask for and the official channels in which we ask for them. Like for instance, Jared will never ask you for your personal cell phone number through your email. If that happens, report it. That's not something we should ever do. And so I don't know if there's basic guidelines or rules on these types of official channels for certain things. If there's not, I want to make them so that everyone at least knows where to go to find out if something like this happens, and it's more questionable than this.
Good stuff. All right, moving on. So first step towards the DAO. I guess there's some work around the voting DApp, and there's also one OKR around liquid pledging. And then there's also been some conversations and experiments around Gitcoin and so on. So I'm not quite sure sort of exactly what we want to get out of this, but maybe start with sort of spreading some context. And I think Andy, you might have some, and then Graham. Is it Graham?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to take it away? What your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So initial investigation into the voting DApp. Basically, it's not so much about features or doing anything new. It's really about trying to discover like what is the reason that people would feel compelled to vote. So that's what's currently happening now. There's a survey that's been created by Patrick from User Experience Design, and that's going to be going around the community. I've got a meeting with Hutch tomorrow to send it out to basically try to figure out, why would someone pay gas fees in order to vote? My suspicion is probably around the allocation of funds, but I want to validate that through a survey. And then also investigating how to create kind of on-chain consequences. The idea being that having an on-chain vote is very expensive, and if it is only a signal to the research foundation, it's a very expensive way to signal. Whether there's other channels such as Reddit, or in fact the feature nomination or the feature voting kind of app with inside of Status, looking at that as well. Not a very in-depth update, I'm afraid.
I'm curious a bit about if we are looking into sort of delegative democracy and so on. I know Ricardo was doing some work. Is he on the call? Is that something we're looking into? Or is there something around that? For example, to deal with sort of low voter turnout and these types of things.
These conversations are happening. What I'm looking at, I think what I'm trying to avoid is building or adding on complexity onto the initial voting flow before understanding, what is the things that people will vote on. But yeah, I do believe Ricardo's investigating it. There's a status discuss, and there is a understanding work is going to start happening on the DAO when Jared gets back from holiday.
So we don't want to put it forward right now with respect to liquid pledging and these sorts of things, but instead wait. Is that the general idea?
Yeah, that's my conclusion. Just if we can't, I mean, first things first, to try find, what is the reason that people will vote, or what topics. The reason for that is low voter participation is, I mean, not just amongst the status voting, that it's low amongst pretty much every single carbon voting or on-chain voting DApp.
Okay. Cool. Andy, do you have some things around Gitcoin?
There's no particular update that I want to give just right now. There's some other people that I need to speak to before we speak publicly. And just on the voting stuff, I tend to agree with Graham. I think that he's approaching this in quite a sensible way. It's a really difficult topic. A lot of people have taken it on. And I think that his core insight that if you are going to require people to go through the pain of voting on chain, and sure, there are UX things that we can do to make that easier and more smooth, but it's always going to be a little bit of like added extra effort for the user. Then you really need to have on-chain consequences, and deciding what those on-chain consequences are is quite difficult to do. Graham, I think that Oscar's right that probably the best kind of on-chain consequences are likely to be found in some of the democracy work that Ricardo is doing, and perhaps liquid pledging. So there's some kind of financial results on chain, even if the actual result of the vote is not necessarily reflected in the decision that gets made on chain, if you see the distinction that I'm drawing there. The Gitcoin update, Oscar, will come next week, or 2 weeks from now, rather.
For those interested, I interviewed Gitcoin yesterday for one of my podcasts, and that'll be releasing this week if you want to hear more about how they work and what their kind of underlying principles are.
Yes, I could add something that falls into this bucket, which is, right now we're deploying contracts to testnet and mainnet. And, we're taking the first logical progression in decentralized governance with that, which is basically moving to a multi-sig wallet. That's what, right now, we believe is still a secure way to do things. And sort of that's sort of the state of where things are today. And then we're talking about the DAO and things like liquid pledging. There's this big gap between that vision and where we are today, right? And like, what are the actual features or the progression that's going to fill that gap? And so I guess one question I've been asking is like, if you could build one feature in 60 days or less that moves a multi-sig wallet towards being a DAO or a DAO component, what would it be? And there's very little feedback on that, right? Because it turns out very few people have ever even used a multi-sig wallet or use one on a regular basis. So something we started doing is we have like a working group of people that use the multi-sig to administer some of these contracts we're deploying on testnet, and just seeing what's the process and what's the pain points in trying to bring people together to actually administer these contracts. And I think, there's little by little some learnings, and we're seeing pain points like the coordination of it has to be done offline or off chain just to get a vote, or just get things done with a multi-sig wallet. So I started a channel called Multi-Sig Evolution. If you're interested in participating in these testnet votes and using a multi-sig wallet, or just the discussions, come join us there, because there's really very little feedback, because it seems like there's just not enough people who even use the multi-sig wallet. And if that's the case, how can we really expect people to do more sophisticated forms of governance? Yeah, so that's it.
Great point. Yeah.
What you said there about coordination, I remember this group that just published an article where they're using Whisper for coordinating transactions, basically. That might be an idea. I'll dig it up if it's of any interest.
Yeah, for sure. We're completely open. Right now, what we're using is basically, we're using the Gnosis multi-sig wallet. We haven't even used the safe that they released. So there's definitely a lot of room for progression from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Jacek's point is a good one. That, like, first of all, the Bloom guys are very good at what they do. And, you know, it's interesting that they're using Whisper in the way that it was originally intended, which is to gossip information about various different aspects of your identity around their provider network, so that they can sort of do KYC and only have to submit one transaction onto the chain to confirm that you are who you're claiming to be. And Barry, I think that's, I mean, to potentially answer your question, which is a really good one, about like, what is the one thing that you would build in the next 6 months to try and move from a multi-sig wallet to a full-on DAO, it would certainly be some kind of Whisper notification system that would improve the coordination that the coordination costs and problems that we're already running into with the multi-sig wallets that we're running for ENS. Like, if I could get a little notification in my status app to say, hey, Barry wants you to sign this transaction, that would be really beneficial.
It might also, with respect to the multi-sig, like, it might be a training thing. So maybe we can host some super basic tutorial session or whatever that people can join, just in terms of actually using it. I don't know if that would help. And maybe explaining sort of the connection with governance and so on, in terms of getting more people to play on with this thing. In terms of, you asked like about what we can do in a short period of time. I agree with what Andy said. I also think that getting some kind of integrating sort of ideas and swarms and having some kind of proposal based around that, even if it's like, so if you remember Jared's presentation before with like requests for information, requests for procurement and these types of things, I think having like a very basic kind of thing there would be very useful. It's something that we barely started doing back when there was like an open boundary team, but we didn't really do it seriously. So I'm revisiting roughly those ideas, but doing it right could be interesting as well. And it would also play into sort of the liquid pledging kind of thing. So you could imagine that, I don't know, maybe the hardware wallet or whatever, right? Like that there's some budget because we want to do this thing, and then it becomes reprioritized because there are funds associated to it, for example. Does anyone else have anything on this specific topic?
I'm not sure if this is the same topic, but the signing of the principles. And I mean, is there going to be any development required on that? Similar topic in the sense that it is part of a DAO in the sense of agreeing to a constitution.
I think it's indeterminate, not determined right now. Barry, you updated the version of the how to sign it, I believe.
There's another version that we can use, but it basically just signs it using it basically signs it using only Web3 as an option. But I think both versions will create a valid signature.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of moving forward with that and the specific design on that, it seems like we can wait until Jared comes back, but at least that seems to be the decision right now. But we can also revisit this and start it earlier if that seems like it's interesting.
Maybe something. Sorry, Oskar, to jump back in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something that actually I did just see. I think was the Discuss. There was like an update in Discuss, and I think I didn't see it initially, but I just saw it. Is Jared posted a reply And something he mentioned that I guess I didn't think about was, I guess that eventually there'll be an actual smart contract that validates the signature and that someone signed, right? So right now we're all just submitting it into Slack, but at some point in the future, I guess there'll be there'll be like an actual smart contract that validates and stores the signature on chain.
Yep. Sure. The main purpose for the cryptographic signature kind of thing, that was more about making sure that it was something that we individually was sort of agreeing to, and that was sort of the bar in terms of reaching consensus, as opposed to just this thing that a few set of people pushed out and it was like a so-called marketing message. That was sort of the main thing. But in terms of actual consequences, there are no specific consequences associated with it, because it's not part of a greater design right now. But we can still reuse the signature, so we can redo it as well easily, I think.
There's also, I guess, the aspect that the address you sign with isn't like what ties that to us as an individual. I don't have a specific tie to that address that I use, other than it's one of the address, like my address that's in my Slack.
Yeah, exactly. That might be something where we want to have it be more privacy preserving, where you could have like a persona that you interact with that's not necessarily your normal name or whatever, and that's associated with the DAO in some ways.
Well, what's the point? I mean, it's either like I attest to these principles and I'm showing that I'm doing that. And
one point would be that if you can be pseudonymous with respect to interacting with the DAO, so you wouldn't be able to get any funds unless you do certain things. That's one idea. Whether that's the right path or not, this remains to be seen, but that's an example of how that would be applicable. Okay, I guess we're running out of time. Is there something that people feel like it missed, especially from sort of the part 2, which is more sort of general, sort of specific teams and so on? Is it something that someone thinks they want to talk about or bring up or get some kind of decision or discussion about?
I'll just briefly mention that the next Ethereum hard fork is coming up. For those that have missed it, I don't think that should be anybody on this call, but in case anybody's listening. So there's a couple of VIPs going in there. There's an Ethereum dev call meeting soon. Check those out because they will deeply affect us.
All right, cool. So I guess with that, we can finish up this meeting. This recording on YouTube, possibly in live here, I'm not sure. And also, if you want to add things to the notes, thanks so much, Andy, for taking notes. And thank you, Johnny, for recording. That's it for this time. I'll put up a GitHub issue for the next one in 2 weeks as well. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
See you guys.
Thank you, bye.
See you guys. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.